The Christian fundamentalist and apologist always says that Isaiah in his prophecies will convince that Christ and the resurrection is valid. Well, I've got 3 of Isaiah's prophecies right here, and we're going to dig in with great detail and determine if it's enough to make me want to run back and fall to my knees in front of the cross. One of the major arguments of the Christian apologists for proof of the resurrection of Jesus Christ is the use of Isaiah's prophecies in the Old Testament being fulfilled in the New Testament. Reasoning being that the prophecies were 700 to 800 years before Christ ever arrived, and that if proven to be fulfilled, not only from Christ's arrival, but his works, miracles, and resurrection, then indeed it can be traced back to the supernatural origin of God, and very specifically the Christian God alone. Fulfillment of these prophecies negate all religions except Christianity. Even our cousins, the Muslim and Jew, are retired. So this is important to the Christian apologist, for if he loses the argument here with Isaiah's prophecies, his entire premise of Christ being the Son of God falls into nothing more than the folklore category. So like other sections of my channel, Isaiah and his prophecies make up one playlist. And in a previous episode, I reasoned that there was good probable evidence, very good probable evidence that Isaiah actually did exist. So that's one thing I'm willing to concede. And I imagine he himself, as well as those around him, did indeed think he was a prophet. Whether he was or not, we will see. For in this episode, I'm going to take just a few of his prophecies about the coming of the Messiah. And the 3 that we're going to talk about today are as follows. 1, that he would be born of a virgin and referred to as the Immanuel. 2, that he would have a Galilean ministry. And 3, he would be an heir to the throne of David and the Davidic covenant. So let's start with the middle one. Did Jesus have a Galilean ministry? Well, maybe. In Isaiah chapter 9, the areas of Zebulun and Naphtali are told to have a great light which will take them from the darkness. And these areas are what is Galilee, which is the area where Jesus supposedly grew up. Galilee is a region in northern Israel that falls south of Lebanon, has the Sea of Galilee to the east and a mountainous range to the west, and at the southern end a great valley known as Jezreel. There has been some scant evidence to suggest that he was born in a tiny Arab village just outside of Nazareth, but we don't really actually have any proof of that. We do have pretty conclusive evidence, not definite but probable, that was based on the merits of a very meticulous historian and senator in Rome that did say that Jesus was tried and executed, and this would have happened in Jerusalem. So we can probably say for sure that Christ roamed around in Jerusalem or was simply transported there for trial. We think that may be plausible, but the fact is, we don't have any archaeological evidence of the whereabouts of Christ. And if you'll check my sources, I didn't just use skeptics and atheists as references. There are plenty of Christian articles in there too. And I found without exception that every single time I had a Christian article in front of me, they simply used Luke and Matthew as evidence for fulfillment of Isaiah's prophecies. And that is not evidence. For the writings of Matthew, at the very, very least, possibly were written 70 AD. But most scholars believe that Luke and Matthew were written somewhere between 80 and 100 AD. So like I've said in other episodes, we don't have anybody of the population, disciples, apostles, friends, relatives, even the neighbor down the street, putting on paper their eyewitness account. Not of Christ, not where he was, not what he taught, and not of what miracles were performed, and certainly not a resurrection. And one of the reasons we don't have any real evidence on the accord of his life outside of the Bible is because he really wasn't that influential of a figure during his life compared to what he was after his life. How much of a Galilean ministry did he have, really? We don't really know. So I tried to find some physical evidence for Mary Magdalene, one of Jesus' closest companions, and I found none whatsoever for her either. But let's say, for the sake of argument, that he did have a huge Galilean ministry as predicted by Isaiah in the Old Testament. Is this really a significant prophecy? a Jew born in a Jewish area who went up to Galilee to spread a message 700 to 800 years after a man predicted there'd be a ministry in this area. And even if Jesus did proclaim himself as the true Son of God, there is the possibility that this man was well versed in Jewish tradition and writings and was either a liar or a lunatic, which Josh McDowell in his book More Than a Carpenter adamantly denies, but it could be. I'm well versed in Revelation. I could claim I'm the second coming today and maybe get a following. And this is all speculation on my part. And that's the difference between myself and the Apologist. I don't know what was going on during that time, but the point is, neither does the Apologist or anyone else. So I would not say a prediction of a man having a Galilean ministry serves as a prophecy being fulfilled predicted by Isaiah. And as far as the next prophecy of being an heir to the throne of David in the Davidic covenant, there is absolutely zero evidence that he is related to King David in any way whatsoever. And there's absolutely zero evidence that he inherited anything after he died. We only know that many stories were written about his resurrection 50 to 100 years after the fact. So that sort of prophecy isn't really a prophecy, it's just a tenet of your religious belief, and is wholly unconvincing to me. Now, the third prophecy that I'm going to talk about today from Isaiah, I think not only negates the notion that Isaiah was a prophet, but may indeed destroy the very foundation of the premise of Christianity to begin with. And that consists of the virgin birth. Because there's a real problem here in Isaiah 7:14, where it says, "Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Immanuel." And the problem is one that any scholar knows and is an old argument, but yet the Christian apologist will not concede. The original word for virgin in Hebrew is Alma, and it doesn't mean virgin. It means young woman and possibly young unmarried woman. The word for virgin in Hebrew is Betula. Now, one of the arguments made by the apologist is that all young unmarried women were virgins in that time, and that may be true. But the problem is, if the word Alma was meaning in context only young woman, then it doesn't mean virgin at all, no matter how you try to interpret it. If it means young unmarried woman, well, now you can't interpret that she's unmarried once she's with Joseph. And also, the word Alma occurred 9 times in other Hebrew texts, and the context always meant young woman. And the word Betula occurred 50 times in the Hebrew Bible, and it always meant virgin, not young woman. Now, the argument that the apologist will make is that Matthew confirms that Mary was indeed a virgin when she bore Jesus Christ, and is confirmed because Matthew was guided in his writing by the Holy Spirit. And that argument is ridiculous. But this is what the fundamentalists especially will use as confirmation, as illustrated by William Lane Craig's quote during an interview, when asked, was Christ really born from a virgin? Quote, "When I was a non-Christian, I used to struggle with this too. But then it occurred to me that for a God who could create the entire universe, making a woman pregnant wasn't that big of a deal. Given the existence of a creator and designer of the universe, for which we have good evidence in parentheses, an occasional miracle is child's play. Historically speaking, the story of Jesus' virginal conception is independently attested by Matthew and Luke, and is utterly unlike anything in pagan mythology or Judaism. So what's the problem?" Unquote. And this is why I'm so hard on these people. William Lane Craig is an evangelist, and he starts out by saying we have good evidence as a creator of the universe, which we certainly do not. We have no evidence whatsoever. None. I believe that there's some sort of higher power that created the universe too, as a theist. But I'm not going to walk into Matt Dillahunty's studio and try to prove it to him, because I would walk in empty-handed. So that right there shows you where the apologist mindset is. And once again, he takes texts which were written 50 to 100 years after the fact, texts that have no authorship. In other words, we have no idea who even wrote them, but are sure these anonymous writers were guided by the Holy Spirit, and one of them must have been Matthew because they said so. So therefore, the Hebrew word Alma, meaning young woman, doesn't mean that at all, per the apologist, with his fabricated evidence that actually contradicts the real evidence. I'm sorry it makes the fundamentalists and any other Christian uncomfortable. I'm sorry it makes you uneasy. But your premise of Jesus being born from a virgin is most likely a lie. And according to the actual concrete text, it was. But that's not the only problem with this prophecy from Isaiah. His name wasn't Immanuel. Who started calling him Immanuel? When he had his Galilean ministry, which we're not even sure how large it was, were they calling him Yeshua or were they calling him Immanuel? We don't know. That's a simple fact, Christian apologist. We don't know. But we do know that he was referred to as Immanuel from anonymous writers 50 to 100 years after the fact with no authorship whatsoever. But it all makes sense to William Lane Craig because it simply had to be Matthew because the Bible said so, and he must have been filled with the Holy Spirit because the Bible said that as well. If you look at my source sheet in the description, you'll see that there was a lot of work that I had to do to organize this. In the past, I've read the Apologist and the Atheist take on Isaiah. And I'm always hoping that one day I'm going to discover something that I didn't know before that's going to make me want to reconvert. And we'll be going through the other important prophecies of Isaiah as well in future videos on this playlist. But I think as of right now, I can safely say that these 3 prophecies from Isaiah are only fulfilled in some sort of reality that is about 3 blocks down from where the rest of us live. But if you like to read some more fiction, check out my novel The Second Fall, an offbeat apocalypse that is sure to offend the fundamentalist. On Amazon, link is in the video description as well as the banner, and I will see you next time as we once again take that sword of reason and reality and thrust it right into the heart of ignorance.